Ho, ho, ho! Is this thing on? Mic check. One sleigh, two sleigh. That's right. I've got a podcast now. Stories, jokes, and some serious North Pole nonsense. Santa Has a Podcast is out now at santahasapodcast.com. Ho, ho, ho!
Support American jobs while standing up for your values. OldGloryDepot.com brings you conservative pride on premium, made-in-USA gear. Don't settle. Wear your patriotism proudly. Visit OldGloryDepot.com today.
I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren. In studio with me today is Sean Noble. Sam is out doing budgets for the county, which sound like a lot of fun, doesn't it, Sean?
It sounds like a blast. Glad to be here.
We are honored to have with us Ambassador Thomas Shannon. He served our country for 35 years in the State Department. He was the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, the third highest ranking position at the State Department. He also holds a personal rank of Career Ambassador and is now serving as a Senior International Policy Advisor. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so we always like to find a little tidbit about our guests. You are a fan of Bossa Nova music. Is that true from Brazil?
It is indeed true. It's a remarkable form of music, which is entirely Brazilian. It's like a Brazilian jazz.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Well, Sean and I are going to invite you out here to Arizona because we have this great museum called the Musical Instrument Museum.
That's right.
And on February 19th, they're actually doing the Art of Bossa Nova concert.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you need to come on out here.
And it's
This
great
is
time
pretty
to be
exciting.
here.
Yeah, you need to come out. So welcome
February
to the
19th.
February 19th. Come on out. We'll treat you to
Okay.
dinner. Bring the better
Great.
half, and we'll come out and treat you to dinner. So we want to talk to you obviously a lot about Venezuela today.
Sure.
But first, I want you to explain something to our audience because you'll know it. Okay. So regarding the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, France, Italy, and Spain are blocking efforts to designate them as a terrorist organization. As a person who's been in this world for 35 plus years, why would they do that?
I can only imagine that they think the Islamic Revolutionary Guard is going to play a very important role in whatever political transition happens in Iran. And they want to be able to engage with them without the legal complications that come from a designation that, such as you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But let me make it clear to everybody, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is very involved in terrorist activities throughout the Middle East and beyond. And they're a significant adversary and one that needs to be treated in accordance with how they behave.
Ambassador, how involved is the Revolutionary Guard, Hezbollah, in Venezuela? You hear these rumors and so forth. How involved were they down there?
You know, that's a very good question. And in many ways, the Cuban presence was the most significant security presence and intelligence presence inside of Venezuela, and the one that was most useful to the Venezuelan government, first of Hugo Chávez and then Nicolas Maduro, in terms of maintaining their internal security and understanding the threats they faced from outside of Venezuela. But also the Russians have played an important role there, and the Iranians have played an important role more than any other reason because they want to have a presence in the region near the United States where they can show the United States that they're not isolated and that they can operate in regions that are important to us. And I would say that Iran's presence broadly was first in the oil and gas sector for a period of time, But the Hezbollah, Iranian intelligence, or Iranian Revolutionary Guard connection was, in my opinion at least, really a product of maintaining a contact with other entities that found themselves in conflict with the United States and creating kind of a fraternity of thugdom,
Okay.
where thuggish governments and terrorist organizations kind of share best practices among themselves about how to deal with Americans.
Well, and I think that that's one of the things that a lot of Americans probably don't recognize as to why this was such an important situation for the president to engage in. Because, under the Monroe Doctrine, we want to have hemispheric safety and security. And to your point about Iran wanting to kind of flex their muscle to say, hey, we can operate in your backyard with no consequence. I think that was an important component of this.
Indeed, yes, it was.
Before we get to Venezuela and talk in depth about that, so what happens to Cuba now? Explain to our audience what Venezuela meant to Cuba and what are the possible ramifications to Cuba now.
Listen, if you'll recall, in 1989, the Soviet Union collapses. The Soviet Union had been Cuba's principal foreign partner, and one that had helped keep the Cuban government afloat through loans, through resources, and political engagement, and through offering protection. By 1991, the Russian Federation can no longer sustain that relationship, and the Russian Federation steps away from Cuba and basically leaves Cuba isolated and without much economic or security support. And this is a very difficult period of time for Cuba, and they search for allies and partners to take the place of Russia. And with Hugo Chávez's election in 1998 and his coming to government in 1999, Venezuela becomes Cuba's principal external partner. In fact, to a certain extent, Venezuela almost becomes a vassal state of Cuba because of the relationship between Fidel Castro and Hugo Chávez. And the Venezuelan government under Hugo Chávez begins to supply the Castro government with significant amounts of oil and gas and cash. And in exchange, the Cubans provide Venezuelans doctors and other kind of social support to operate inside of the poorest parts of Venezuelan society. But most importantly, they provide intelligence officers to work with Venezuelan intelligence to maintain close control over the political opposition and to keep an eye on the Venezuelan armed forces to make sure that no coup can be mounted from the military. And they also end up providing, in the aftermath of a failed effort to overthrow President Chávez, they also end up providing most of the security around the president. And so there's a symbiotic relationship between the two countries that becomes very important, but it is almost existential for Cuba. Cuba does receive oil and gas from other countries, Mexico in particular. In fact, at the time of the raid on Caracas, Mexico was probably providing more oil and gas to Cuba than Venezuela was. But having said that, the Venezuelan oil and gas was utterly crucial to Cuba. And Cuba's in a period of slow political change now that the Castros and kind of the personal leadership of the Cuban Revolution is gone, and the revolution has become bureaucratized, and the Cuban Communist Party is attempting to maintain control in a society with almost no economic growth. And so the sudden absence of Venezuelan oil and gas and Venezuelan cash is going to have a profound impact on Cuba. And the Trump administration knows this and believes it has significant leverage on Cuba and therefore is going to use it.
We're with Ambassador Thomas Shannon, served 35 years for our country and was formerly the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. So our audience would be asking this question. Why would Venezuela be dependent upon Cuba for doctors and security around the president? I mean, most people think, well, Can't Venezuela protect their own president? What is a special skill set, supposedly, that Cuba has that Venezuela doesn't to do such task?
It's a great question because Venezuela, because it has the largest oil and gas reserves in the world, and because it was a prominent member of OPEC, and because of its relationship with the United States prior to Hugo Chavez, in which it was one of our closest military partners in the hemisphere. It was our closest energy partner in the sense that Venezuela's energy industry was vertically integrated into the United States. Although oil was pumped in Venezuela, it was almost all refined in the United States. It had, through Citgo, a distribution network in the United States that had more gas stations than Kentucky Fried Chicken had stores.
Right.
And so there was this remarkably connected and integrated relationship between Venezuela and the United States. But at the same time, Venezuela had significant problems with poverty. And in large cities like Caracas, major slum areas.
Right.
And it had really significant medical and social needs that weren't being met by the Venezuelan government prior to Hugo Chavez. And therefore, when Chavez came in, one of the first things he wanted to do was ensure that he could meet the social needs of people who had voted for him. And that meant putting doctors and social workers deep into some of the most difficult and dangerous parts of large cities. And the Cubans were prepared to do that. And that became an important part of Hugo Chavez's political outreach. But in the early 2000s, there was a revolt, first in the petroleum industry against Hugo Chavez, and then in the military against Chavez. And he was momentarily deposed. And in the aftermath of that several-week loss of power, when he returns to power, he is determined to fundamentally reshape the Venezuelan security services and the army. But in order to do that, he needs to have an understanding of where he has enemies. And
Right.
he cannot trust his own institutions to figure that out. So he brings the Cubans in to do that. And the Cubans have stayed.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster. We've got about a minute 30 here left in our segment before we bring you back on for the next segment. Question for you. So why should people get involved with the United States Foreign Service? We hate Sean and I aren't isolationists, and we feel this is a very important part of the U.S. soft power. Why should people get involved, and is it hard to get involved with the U.S. Foreign Service?
I was a Foreign Service officer for 35 years. And in order to get into the Foreign Service, you take a test. There's no educational requirements. There's no language requirements.
Really?
The State Department looks for really bright people who are adventuresome, who like to learn languages, learn about other people, but more importantly, are prepared to carry the message of the United States around the world, defend U.S. interests, protect U.S. citizens. And it's a great way to serve your country. It's a great way to serve your elected leaders, while living sometimes in very demanding and sometimes very dangerous environments, but very exciting environments.
Yeah, you have a lot of stories, I'm sure, to tell at Thanksgiving with the family. We're with Ambassador Thomas Shannon. You can follow him on X, AMB Shannon. He doesn't post much. We'll hopefully get him back on doing that. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back.
All right, imagine this. You're running for president. Yes, president. What's the first thing you need? Well, besides the $1 million fundraising, you need to secure your web domain. You need your name, .vote. Easy to remember, straight to the point, and a direct link to your campaign. No, but seriously, whether you're getting out to vote or convincing people that yes, you can fix the potholes on Main Street, a .vote domain helps you stand out. It's not just a website, it's a call to action. Head over to GoDaddy.com or name.com, type in your name, .vote, and boom, you're ready to make a lasting impact. Get started today with your .vote web address.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Horn, with Sean Noble. We are our first guest today. It's been fantastic so far, and I'm sure he'll hit a home run in the second segment. Ambassador Thomas Shannon, 35 years representing the State Department. He was the third highest ranking position at the State Department as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. He's now a senior international policy advisor, and he likes Brazilian music, which we've discussed in the first segment. So, Ambassador, Trump really pulled off a daring arrest. We'll call it an arrest.
Yeah.
What happens in Venezuela now? My 2 cents is Trump views all foreign policy based on Iraq. He views it as a failure in the fact that we tried to change everything there, and then you had this bloodshed, this turmoil. So my sense is he feels like he takes the head of Venezuela, who's a narco-terrorist, but you can't replace everybody because then who's going to run the government, even though the opposition won? Am I far off? Am I thinking what he's thinking on that?
No, you're not. I think you're right. Listen, I served, as you noted, 35 years. But my last 18 months were the first 18 months of the first Trump administration. And I was very briefly, for 12 days, President Trump's acting Secretary of State, until Rex Tillerson was confirmed. I was then the acting Deputy Secretary of State until John Sullivan was confirmed. And then I returned to my position of Undersecretary of State for the rest of that time.
Well, that's fantastic.
And while I can't pretend that I know the president intimately, I can tell you that I was in lots of meetings with him. I heard him speak about Venezuela any number of times. And he spoke of it with great frustration, because he saw this as a country, as we noted, with the largest oil and gas reserves in the world, a democratic history, a history of constitutional order and election, and yet one that had fallen into political conflict, had become alienated from the United States, had begun courting the enemies of the United States, had an economy that was in serious decline, was bleeding people as Venezuelans fled Venezuela. And he couldn't understand why American presidents and why regional leaders couldn't solve this problem. And so he sought across his first term any number of means and mechanisms to try to address it. But always in his mind was the concern that if you promote regime change and it fails, that you, the United States, are stuck with it, as we were in Iraq.
The break it, you fix it. The PAL motto.
That's right. That's it. That's it exactly. And the only reason I mention this is because in some ways, President Trump has been pursuing Nicolas Maduro for 10 years and pursuing a solution to Venezuela for 10 years, and has been frustrated at different moments and different turns. And so when he decides to launch the raid in Caracas and capture Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores, his wife, to bring them to the United States to stand trial, he faces a very real conundrum, which is, does he turn to a democratic opposition, which asserts that it won the election in 2024 but was denied power by Maduro, in order to promote a regime change? Or does he look for some other process, maybe a slower process of political transition? And I think his concern that the democratic opposition was not capable of capturing the Venezuelan state and actually running Venezuela led him to try to strike a deal with the remnants of the regime that he just took a sledgehammer to, in the hopes that he can stabilize Venezuela, create a degree of public order, and then look for ways to restart the Venezuelan economy. And I believe that's what he's attempting to accomplish now.
That I think you're spot on. What, with your experience, how likely is that to be successful? What are the things that we have to be watching for?
There's a couple things. First and foremost is the partner that we have. The administration, both the president and Secretary Rubio, engaged almost immediately with the remnants of the Maduro regime, especially the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who's now the acting or interim president. Secretary Rubio's had several telephone conversations with her. President Trump has now had a telephone conversation with her. And shortly after the raid, a senior U.S. diplomat, John McNamara, traveled from Colombia to Caracas to meet with the government of now President Rodriguez. And just yesterday, the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, was in Caracas meeting with President Rodriguez. This is a profound statement. It means that this regime is that the Trump administration is prepared to see this regime as the de facto leader of Venezuela, and therefore one it has to work with. Having said that, President Trump also met yesterday in the White House with Maria Corina Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who is the leader of the Democratic opposition. And the president faces the immediate challenge of who is this partner we're working with? Because the fact of the matter is, it's the same regime that Nicolas Maduro led,
Right.
just with a different leader. And the question is, can they be turned into a compliant partner or not? From my point of view, and I know these people, they view themselves as revolutionaries. They're almost genetically anti-American or anti-Yankee. And they will do what they have to do in order to survive, but they're going to be reluctant. They will be reluctant to be long-term partners of the United States.
Yeah.
So then the challenge facing the president is, how do you get what you can from the people who are in charge now while promoting some kind of political transition that will involve the Venezuelan people and allow for the emergence of a democratic government that will be a better long-term partner for the United States. And I really think that's where the president and the Secretary of State face their biggest challenge. Not just stabilizing the moment, not just ensuring that there is not the insurgency and then the civil war that we saw in Iraq. How do you maintain the peace? But then how do you convince the Venezuelan people that there's a hopeful future for themselves so they don't flee and come to the United States? And how do you create an environment in which people think that they're going to have a voice in choosing their leadership and in choosing the larger direction of your country? And that's a political challenge. It's not a military challenge. And unfortunately, as powerful as the U.S. military is, as imposing and threatening as it is, the U.S. military alone is not going to be able to accomplish this. It has to be done diplomatically. And that means we need to put people on the ground. We need
Right.
to have people back in Venezuela. And this is going to take time, and it's going to be a challenge.
We've got about a minute here left with you, and hope you'll come on again sometime and talk much longer. What do you think the American public does not recognize about Donald Trump's foreign policy? What is something you think people are missing about his views of the world?
He represents a profound shift in how the United States will engage with the world going forward. He has decided that the alliance-based system that the United States built in the aftermath of World War II and its commitment to effectively ordering the globe and ordering a global economy has run its course, and that in a world of emerging competitors like China, like India, like a revanchist Russia, that the way of running the world that we had been successful for the United States for nearly 80 years now costs too much in terms of money and in terms of blood.
Yeah.
Well,
said.
Ambassador Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. Come on out here in February for some music. We hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us.
All the best.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds.
Old Glory Depot isn't just a website. It's a movement. Featuring unapologetically conservative shirts and gear, we're proud to deliver 100% American-made products. From premium materials to bold designs, every purchase supports American jobs and celebrates our country. Show your pride, support your values, and shop oldglorydepot.com because patriotism never goes out of style.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, with Sean Noble, and our in-studio guest is Greg Roeberg. He is an attorney, and he has decided to run for Attorney General. And so you're a glutton for punishment, basically, what you're telling me.
That's what they're telling me. That's what they're telling me.
How's the campaign trail been for you so far?
It's going really well. We're getting a lot of traction. We're going out. We're visiting the legislative district Republican Party chapters, and couldn't have expected a better turnout, a better enthusiasm for our message and our mission here. We got a lot of folks that are excited to see us in the race. We're optimistic.
So tell our audience a little bit about you. What's your background? Why do you want to be AG? Why should they vote for you?
Sure. So I'm originally from the East Coast. I went to college and law school at Georgetown.
Oh, wow.
in Washington, D.C., and I visited Arizona, probably like a lot of your listeners, in happened to be March. And a lot of folks who visit Arizona in March, time to move, right? so
Hook.
I always tell everybody when they come to move here, I say, be here July.
right.
If you're okay with it, come.
Exactly. We to avoid the mad rush, right? Coming out in July.
Exactly.
So I moved here, set up shop, coming up, this is about 20 years, I graduated law school in 2005. So 20 years ago, set up shop as a business law attorney, working with, in the old days, small and medium-sized businesses, getting them set up and getting, working with consumers, working with them. And I was excited and really happy with that field. And then about 10 years ago now, I can't believe it was 10 years ago, when Donald Trump became on the scene and entered the Republican political system, I'd always been conservative Republican. I'd always voted Republican, but I wasn't really an active in the party, right? And so Donald Trump kind of inspired me to get more involved. And because I had relationships from Washington, D.C., I ended up going to work for the team, and I worked for the transition team, the inauguration team, technically during transition period in that 2016. Remember, Arizona wasn't really a swing state in 16. And then came back to Arizona, had a little bit of a detour in life. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2019.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a challenge, definitely. Tested a life test, right? And I was very fortunate. The type of lymphoma I had was curable and is cured. I went through 6 months of chemotherapy, and very happy to say that about a year ago I had my post 5-year checkup, and they're labeling me as cured.
I'm going to pause there for a minute and stop you with this question, Greg. What did you learn about yourself during the 6 months you were battling that? I mean, we all have these moments, these crucibles.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself?
So the big thing I learned when they were going through the diagnosis, I sort of had my come to Jesus moment where I was told in advance, listen, we're doing some tests. Chances are what you have is going to be fine and you're very lucky. However, if it comes back a different way, you have to make arrangements. And
that's a nice conversation.
Yeah, so I was in my, and I kind of pulled an all-nighter, sort of had my come to Jesus moment. I stayed up all night and I sat there thinking, and I sort of came at peace with the process. I was sort of like, I've had a really great life. At that point, I hadn't had a family yet. I was engaged, so my fiance was going through this. But
how old were you when this was happening?
I would have been 38, say.
Okay. Young.
Okay,
Young.
And so, but actually, I learned a lot about, I was an attorney, and the diagnoses, the billing, dealing with providers was a nightmare, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that.
Yeah.
When I was going through the infusion at the infusion center, the chemo, I kind of looked around the room. Folks were twice my age, no legal background, and I was able to navigate this. Another time I'll come on your show and we'll talk specifically about medical billing, medical fraud. But I got a crash course in that, and I was able to navigate it. But I was like, how are these folks with no legal background, some of them, seniors, retirees, how are they going through it? And so
they aren't.
So that, yeah. So that,
fingers crossed.
Exactly. So that sort of touched me and wanted me to get more involved. But once I knew what was going on, was very optimistic because they were telling me, nothing's guaranteed, but your chances are really good with what type of treatment you have. And so I like to tell people, they say, how are you dealing with chemo? And I like to tell people, when you go to Disney World, you can focus on the fact that the lines are long, or you can focus on the fact that you're at Disney World, right? Yeah. So they were saving my life. I was up at the Mayo Clinic in North Phoenix. I was very fortunate. My then wife, her insurance got me into the Mayo Clinic, and so that's kind of the focus.
Mayo's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It was for me, yes.
Well, I think I could do exact physicals there, and everybody should. We've got about 90 seconds left here in this segment. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So then I went back in, worked on the Trump campaign in 2020. By this point, elections became an issue, and I got involved on that side of things. And then in 24, I was selected to be the Trump campaign attorney, the RNC campaign attorney here in Arizona. So I got a crash course in elections, and that's sort of the driving force to get me more engaged in politics.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what was the final crucible that decided that you were going to run for Attorney General?
So I'm very unhappy with Chris Mays. I'm sure a lot of your viewers are.
Oh, yeah.
She's just taken all integrity out of the office.
We both believe that she was a greater harm to the state of Arizona than Katie Hobbs.
Oh, 100%.
We are on the same page on that. And she's just wasting all our resources, suing Donald Trump over Lord knows what these days, 30-some lawsuits, and that wastes resources. And I want to step in. I've lost a lot of faith in a lot of our politicians, frankly. And so this is the first time I've never run for anything. I'm not, and we're coming in and we're getting in it to win it here.
All right. Folks, we're with Greg Roeberg. He is running for Attorney General in Arizona. He is an attorney here, and you can find him on X at Greg, 1G, for Arizona. Greg, F-O-R-A-Z. This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back with Greg Roeberg and talk more about Arizona. Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or Name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren of Sean Noble. In studio with us is Greg Roeberg. He is running for Attorney General of Arizona. We're going to do some questions and answers here about policy.
Love it.
All right. So Trump has ICE out in force in Minnesota. They're coming to Arizona. If we had the same tomfoolery here with certain people, it's definitely not 98% of the public, but you have your 1-2% who are just basically nuts. We have them on both sides, but they seem to have a little more nutty. How would you handle that as Attorney General if you have protesters throwing things at ICE agents, blocking traffic, taking arms out of their car? What should the Attorney General be doing about that?
Well, so first of all, the Attorney General's, the top law enforcement officer of the state, right? And so if people are violating the law, the Arizona Constitution instructs the Attorney General to step in and prosecute these folks, particularly at the state level. So people are always welcome to peacefully protest. We've heard that phrase for years and years now, right? And I think some folks on the left, they say, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But if you cross the line, you can't expect to get away with it in the name of protesting, right? Not to mention, these aren't really the folks to protest. I drive down, the 10, and maybe I want the speed limit to be 85 or whatever it is sometimes during traffic. It doesn't mean I'm going to try to go interfere with a police officer giving someone a speeding ticket and create danger and problems for everyone involved, right? If you have a problem with the laws, if some of these folks think anyone from around the world can come here and move here, I think that's absurd. But if some folks feel that way, the answer is to write letters to your senators, congressmen, try to have the laws changed. These are just people trying to get on TV, trying to get clicks, frankly. They're, some of these people
are paid. Some are paid.
So many are paid, and they're paid to generate content, get eyeballs, frankly, and they don't care if the law enforcement's life is in harm. They don't care if the immigrant's life is being harmed. They're just out there getting clicks. And, in Arizona, we're not going to stand for it. This isn't Minnesota, right? So we'll step in.
Good. What are some of the lawsuits Chris Mays has sued the Trump administration about that you just think are pure crazy?
I mean, she's gone after Doge initiatives of all things, right? So I guess
which now, seeing the fraud,
we'll go into that.
We're not doing it enough, right?
We'll go into that, but so I don't know why Arizona taxpayers should be spent, or dollars should be spent trying to sue to make sure that waste, fraud, and abuse isn't being investigated in Washington, D.C.
So I'm going to use the counter. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Sure thing.
Okay. So Republicans will do the same thing if we have a President Newsom or something, right? So what makes it when we do it on the state level different from when they do it on the state level?
So generally speaking, Republicans, and I think a lot of your viewers feel this way, we are fundamentally we're federalists, right? We believe in the rights of the states. So when state rights are being abused by the federal government, which happens frequently when the federal government, when Democrats come into play in the federal government, we have a duty to stand up for ourselves, to stand up for the rights of Arizonans, right? This is different from scoring political points and making. I can't even keep up with her lawsuit. You're asking me about the lawsuit. She's up to like 35 of them, right? I can't even keep up.
She'll do
with
another
them.
10 or 15 this year.
She just does it. This is what we get into. Chris Mays is not an attorney, okay? I feel that I'm the only one in the race that really has legal experience and legitimate legal experience. I've had wealthy clients that pay me money, ask me to do things that I have to say no. That is unethical, if not unlawful, right? But mostly unethical. That's unethical. We're not going to do it. When she gets her quote unquote clients from Martha's Vineyard or Long Island or wherever, okay, and they're cutting a check through Act Blue, and they tell her, you need to sue this person. I mean, my heart goes out to the folks that challenged the 2020 election. I don't know if you're following that case, the electors case,
right?
Where some of these folks, they've been almost bankrupted, right? And a judge threw out the case saying, no, you can't prosecute these people for this, right? She's now appealing to try to get that back on.
Yeah, she's hell-bent on that.
And what people don't appreciate is, I don't know this for certain, but I'd be willing to bet all the money in my pocket, those folks are going to sue the state of Arizona for malicious prosecution. It's going to be some $100 million class action lawsuit.
As they should.
Against the state. And we might agree with them fundamentally, but now we're looking at a situation where her getting $100,000 in Democrat donations is going to result in the people of Arizona having to pay $100 million because of some unlawful lawsuit.
Do you have any idea when she pursues cases like that, how many attorneys in the AG's office are assigned to this? How much money does it waste?
So it's hard to say exact dollar amounts, but she has about 400 lawyers at her disposal, okay? And Arizona's unique. This is why it's such an important office. Arizona's unique in that the Attorney General can assign those lawyers to whatever they want. So if she wanted to, all 400 can say, let's go get Trump with our TDS, okay? Most states, you'll have a situation where 3 attorneys are assigned to consumer affairs and 20 are assigned to domestic violence and 5 are assigned to intergovernmental relations, things like that. So it's hard to get a dollar number, but what I would say is every time you've got a team of because she's also putting her best lawyers on it. Let's be realistic, right? That's a top priority.
Sure.
So these top lawyers can't go after drug cartels, right? If they're too busy suing, to make sure DEI initiatives are still remaining in place in Washington, D.C.
What are your other agenda items if you're elected at AG?
So I think this is a really important time in Arizona's history. I think we're poised. AI is coming whether you like it or not, okay?
100%.
Around the world. And the jobs and the construction and the infrastructure behind that, it can be here, it can be in Michigan, it can be in Shanghai, but it's going to happen, right? And so we definitely have to monitor and make sure AI isn't taking advantage or infringing on any of our rights. But at the same time, Arizona's poised to become for AI what Detroit was for cars. And if we don't mess this up right now, we can have 100 years of economic growth off this process and become really a pivotal place in the world. And so for your listeners who don't know that, Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, they're building their chips up in North Phoenix. That's the only place outside of Taiwan they build these chips, which are, people don't appreciate. They pretty much have a monopoly on the world. All the NVIDIA chips are built on it. The chips that Google needs and Gemini and ChatGPT, they need these chips are being built right here. Now, we need to get them power, okay? That's the big bottleneck. We don't have natural gas naturally in Arizona. We have to pipe it in. And right now with the technology, you need natural gas power plants. For instance, there was a power plant up in Kingman where there was an application to expand the power plant. The Corporate Commission approved it. Chris Mays and the environmentalists came in and they sued on permitting grounds saying, no, you need more permitting. And this is what I love about the liberals. The project's still going to get through. No one's alleging it shouldn't happen. She's just delaying it and costing them money and time and 3 years where you have less electricity, less power. Then she sues on the rate increases.
Yeah, so Trump worked out a deal with Taiwan or the trade agreement for $500 billion more in semiconductors. So they're talking about building 5 or 6 more plants, which mean they need to buy more land here.
Yes. Well, I think they already acquired.
They still have to buy more. They've bought 901 acres, but they've got to buy. You're doing 5 more plants, right?
It's huge.
So you brought up a good point. So one thing Trump's not getting credit for, because I think this administration just absolutely sucks at communicating. One thing they're doing a horrible job about is this rare earth mineral stuff. People don't understand Trump is securing America for generations by focusing on this. Well, we happen to have a lot of those minerals here in Arizona. So what will you do as an AG when you're elected if we go and we start mining here? Because there's lots. I think we had somebody on the show. It's like 16 of the 25 minerals are here, right? It's a lot. What will you do to make sure they can get through this permit process fast and do it?
Right. So Arizona, the Attorney General is the chief legal officer of the state. Okay. So right now, Chris May's taking the opposite approach, suing to stop some of these projects. You can go the other way, right? Like, let's say the state's not even involved in a lawsuit. Let's say some green energy something or other is suing to stop for mining. The Attorney General can file what's called an amicus brief with the court. Amicus brief means basically where you have a vested interest and here's our input. Courts weigh that very heavily because technically that is the view of the state of Arizona, right? So we can not only not try to slow down these economic growth engines, we can interfere and come in and help out the good guys when the radical leftist environmentalists are trying to shut them down. But you are right. Here and Nevada, I mean, rare earth minerals are abundant, especially up in the northern part of the state, and we can take advantage of that. Again, we are really poised to. People could be talking about Arizona 100 years from now as just, the greatest place on earth relative to the new economy. And I don't have faith. That's what you asked how I got in this race. I don't have faith that our elected officials really have the vision or the ability to navigate this. My background, I've worked with energy companies. I've worked with technology companies. I've dealt with gas trading. As a business attorney, as you start getting more sophisticated clients, your expertise becomes more sophisticated. I understand power. I understand interconnect studies, electricity, how to expand, the nuclear plant, and water rights. We haven't even talked about water, right? And so I think that if we have the right leadership in place, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. We can steward Arizona into an economic growth engine. Everyone's saying AI is coming, it's going to change the world. It can change the world right here, okay?
Correct. Now,
at the same time, the Attorney General would have jurisdiction. If these data centers, these chip manufacturers, everything's local, the Attorney General would have added jurisdiction to go after abuses by AI, right? And so I also think we need someone with a backbone who's willing to stand up to the major tech companies. I've demonstrated I have a backbone. As I tell people in 24, when everyone was being canceled, when lawyers were being fired, and with the case of the electors, the lawyers for the electors were also being indicted. Lawyers being indicted in 2024.
What they did against the lawyers was really shocking.
They ruined Rudy Giuliani's whole. Our heart goes out for him. But I think he's gonna come around here. But in that time period when lawyers weren't willing to step up, I said, pick me. I reached out to the RNC, and I was willing to step into this highly controversial position surrounding the election and make sure steward the 2024 didn't turn into some of the other years that we've dealt with in previous cycles.
So I'm going to go back to more personal matter here. So I want to hear a funny story of a case you maybe not have accepted. So I'm going to give you one Lindsey Graham tells me often.
Okay.
Lindsey Graham was a small town attorney, right? He did a divorce case. And after the divorce is final, the woman came up. She goes, "Now that we're divorced, is he still my cousin?"
Oh.
And
that's not a true story.
It's true. Oh, yeah, it's true. It's true. So that being said, what's a funny legal story you have? Something like that you didn't take, and it's not going to embarrass him, but something you've had.
Yeah, so this gets into what we're talking about with clients, right? So I was dealing with kind of a complex and my stories aren't as fun because I didn't do family law. I don't have divorce stories, right?
No cousins involved?
No, so nothing like that. But I was dealing with a big, real estate owner. I can't go too far in details, but someone who owned a lot of, lands and businesses on lands. Okay, and we were filing through, these things happen. We were filing through a bankruptcy for some of his properties or whatever it is, and he was like, "Oh, can we just transfer these properties to my daughter prior to the bankruptcy?" I was like, no. This is what we're talking about. I was like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And he's like, "Okay, I'll just triple your fee." And I was like, no, that's not how it works, right? And then he was like, "Can you refer me to other lawyers?" I was like, no. And I was like, "We have never had this conversation. I'm advising you as your attorney. You cannot move assets around during a bankruptcy. That'll, that's
a major no-no.
It'll end you up in jail, frankly.
Yeah.
Okay. And no lawyer's going to accept that. No lawyer, maybe Chris Mays would, but no lawyer is willing to accept that.
Well, it depends if they make a donation on the side.
There you go. Well, and she never practiced, right? So she's
just at ASU, right? Law school. Was that it? She taught a law class.
She taught, and then during her race against Abe Hamada, I would say Abe Hamada won that race. I think a lot of your viewers would agree with that.
I would agree with that 100%. So, I think Abe got screwed.
So she was saying her legal experience was that she was on the corporate commission. That's sort of what she hangs her hat on, and that's not relevant at all. So that's not. I wish I had a more kind of wholesome country story.
Let me ask you this question because it comes up.
Yeah.
Why do you think having practical legal experience is important for an attorney general?
So when the attorney general's role was assigned in the Constitution, it was left in the Arizona Constitution, was left relatively vague. but the legislature defined the role, and the legislature assigned the attorney general as the chief legal officer. We talked about the chief legal advisor to the state, all the state agencies. So if you go to another state, they might have their motor vehicles, their education, sanitation. All those agencies are going to have their own legal teams and legal advisors. That is not the case in Arizona. In Arizona, the law enforcement or the legal advice, sort of the compliance office of every agency, every department in this state falls on the attorney general. So the attorney general needs to know what they're talking about,
Right.
needs to have experience in these fields. We're running into the legislature passed a law, you guys I'm sure are aware of this, where no boys and girls sports, right?
Correct.
Mays came out vehemently, and said, I'm not going to enforce that. And now in a normal state, the school superintendent could have its own attorneys kind of doing things. Not in Arizona. If the attorney general says no, the attorney general's the lawyer for Tom Horn right now.
Yeah. Well, Greg Roeberg, thanks for coming to the studio. We'll hope you'll join us again through the course of the campaign, and we wish you the best luck. How do people find you?
Thank you so much. So as you said, Greg4AZ, GREGFORAZ.com for the website, and at Greg4AZ on my socials, which is X, Instagram, Facebook. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Folks, this is Breaking Battlegrounds. We hope you've enjoyed the show this week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a million.
I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Ho, 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 ho. What do you get when you mix cocoa, candy canes, and strong Wi-Fi signals? You get a podcast. That's right, Santa has a podcast. I'm telling stories from the North Pole, sharing elf updates, and answering your questions. And yes, spilling some holiday secrets. It's festive, it's fun, and fueled entirely by cookies. Tune in wherever you get your podcast. It's Santa has a podcast. Just press play.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds, and my co-host Sean Noble's here in studio, and we have a real treat for you today. We have Stephen Graham. He is an actor and director, and he has come out with a film called Sheepdog. And basically what it is, folks, it focuses on the plight of combat veterans assimilating back into civilian life. I was able to watch it. Sam Stone, who will be on here shortly, was able to watch it. I highly recommend it. It comes out today, and you can learn more about the movie by going to sheepdogthemovie.com. Again, sheepdogthemovie.com. Stephen Graham, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So, Stephen, how long? This seems to be a passion of love for you, a passion project in many ways. What made you dive into this film and work so hard to get it done?
Sure. So in 2011, my car broke down 3 hours north of Los Angeles. I was shooting a movie as an actor just up in Vancouver, Canada, and I wrapped on it and I drove through the night. It was 21 hours into the drive. My car breaks down. I call AAA, and the local tow truck driver who picks me up is like, "Saddle up, partner. We got a long haul into town." And during that drive, I'm nodding off because I'm tired from the drive, and he began to open up to me about his life, about the challenges he was facing in his marriage, being the father of three, financial hardship. And then he began to share with me all the various medications that he was on for his post-traumatic stress, for multiple deployments that he had served overseas. And, throughout this conversation, he just kept stopping himself, and he would say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I've never told my wife. I've never told a therapist." So we get back to LA. I thank him for getting me home safe. And I looked into his eyes, and And I could see that this was a cathartic experience with him, just to share his story with a complete stranger who would listen without prejudice. And that lit the spark. It felt like a sense of responsibility to try to find out if there were more men and women like him that were suffering in silence, that felt disconnected from their own families, their communities, even their brothers and sisters that they served with. So I went out on a nationwide road trip that summer of 2011 to try to uncover that truth, and I found out very quickly that there were indeed many more men and women like him, and that became the foundation for Sheepdog.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
When you had that experience in 2011, did the experience just take a place in your heart and your head? Is that why this movie came? Is it just lasted with you?
Yeah, so I'm the grandson of a POW. My grandfather was a Polish farmer who was captured by the Nazis.
Oh, wow.
During the invasion of Poland, and so I grew up with his stories. He was widowed, and so he moved in with our family, and I had bunk beds, and I'd sleep on the top and fall asleep to his stories, my mom used to say, I don't know how he's telling you that, you're too young to know, and he's never even told us that, and so he shared 5 years in captivity, tortured, and it was the Americans that liberated him, and if it wasn't for them, for the Allied troops, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
And so Sheepdog in some way was already woven into the fabric of my DNA of the man I was going to come to be because of that early experience. So when my world collided with this tow truck driver, it was almost like a sign from God. It was a calling that this is the path I must travel. And it didn't stop just on that road trip in 2011. I was able to build the trust of the Detroit VA Medical Center, and they let me role play with doctors and research, different therapies, and sit in on PTSD orientation classes. I was taken in by Gold Star families across the country. Those are families that have lost their loved ones in combat, and so over the years, people always ask me, this was an incredibly challenging endeavor. I never in my wildest dreams thought it would take 14 years to the screen, and I never took my foot off the gas pedal. But I will say that the folks that trusted me with their stories in every nook and cranny of our country, they became my North Star. There was no quit. When we set out in this endeavor, we said to ourselves, that we would complete the mission or die trying, and I'm relieved and grateful and humbled to be at this stage to share Sheepdog with the world.
You had a great line in this movie, and since you have visited with so many of these returning veterans, basically I'm paraphrasing it, where the woman says to your character, I believe it was, "You haven't changed, you've been replaced." And I felt like that was a line for someone who's talked to a lot of veterans that I just found it so insightful. It's penetrating, Tell us how you got to that line. What brought us to that?
Sure. So in my research, it wasn't like I was sitting at a desk and interviewing veterans. I mean, I was taken in. It would be in their living rooms, in their lives, I lived with several veterans as I was doing my research. So you become a fly on the wall. You see the interactions, the military spouses across the country that really informed a lot of my writing. And that line that you're referring to, I had heard many times military spouses trying to explain that to me or to their husband. And
they have a higher divorce rate, don't they? They have a higher divorce rate, don't they?
Yeah. And that's the interesting part about our movie. Sheepdog's the first movie that picks up 10 years later after that last deployment. And the reason, and that was not necessarily by design, because, as time marched on and we were fighting the fight and trying to get the movie made, I became older, the character became older, but so did all the veterans that I had met with, and I stayed in touch with them. So I got to see their plight, from their last deployment, and in between that, there's a lot of life lived.
Yeah.
For some folks, multiple divorces, more children, different job, career paths, the loss of battle buddies, and it was important to hold the mirror up and show our audience and show the country exactly what I saw. I mean, this is the equivalent in the civilian world of being embedded, not in a conflict zone, but within this community that trusted me and it allowed me to help share their stories, to give them a voice.
It really comes through that how much you integrated that into the story. I mean, it's remarkable. How one of the things I was thinking about as I was watching the movie is that, you know, this is not the kind of movie that you can go pitch and somebody's going to, oh yeah, here's the budget. Here's $20 million.
Yeah, this is a blockbuster. I got it.
How did you work to get the funding? I mean, because this was obviously it's a full production. This is a real film. I mean, what people need to understand, this is the real deal.
Yeah.
So it was expensive, I'm sure. How did that come about?
Boy, so in the beginning, you know, when I was comfortable with a draft, I was willing to go and shop. I ran the gamut of being laughed out of rooms. Then I get interest from, say, a studio or a producer who really loved the writing, but then I would get notes. They wanted my character to be broken. They didn't use that word, but all the notes, that was the intention, and I was never going to depict any of our men and women that have put on the uniform as such, because I also never saw that. But you know, there's a lot of boxes to check off that Hollywood wanted, and I get it. The temptation is rife when you've been fighting the fight and you can cut a corner to potentially get your script made. You might do that, and I wasn't willing to bend the knee, and so what I had to do was I had to go outside the system, and I had to find that private equity. I had to pitch my heart and soul to folks that believed in me and believed in my team to deliver on it. And so I raised all the private equity out of Texas. You know, this is a low budget film that looks, you know, in my opinion, like it was made for 3-4 times more than it was, because we all, you know, I had some of the best crew. Obviously our ensemble, which we'll talk about shortly, just an incredible cast. But what that afforded me was that I could preserve the authenticity. I could really show you what I experienced and what I saw without the gloss or the sanitization of Hollywood. And I you know, we just screened a couple nights ago here in DC at the Navy Memorial Museum, and we had a lot of wounded warriors come out, a lot of veterans, a lot of mental health workers, Gold Star family members, and of course the civilians, their families. And it was such a profound response that we continued to see over the last year on the film festival circuit. But having someone, you know, like Jay Redmond, who's a Navy SEAL, who's just got this incredible story, tear up at the end and hug me and thank me for telling this story, is all you can ever ask for. And all I ever cared about in this endeavor was to get it right, was to be able to give a voice to these folks who don't feel seen, who potentially don't feel appreciated, their families, all of them, and to lift them up and hopefully to inspire. And if we can save a single life with Sheepdog, it will be the greatest Hollywood success story.
Folks, we're with Stephen Graham. He's an actor and director. We're talking about his film, The Sheepdog. You can find it on sheepdogthemovie.com. It's out in theaters this weekend. Highly recommend you go watch it and see it. Everybody complains about the lack of good movies. This is a movie you should go see. This is a movie you should go see. Your crew for the filming were veterans and Gold Star families, correct?
Some of them were. I mean, I had local crew in Western Massachusetts where we shot.
You had pros. But you had
17 military veterans, yes, and 5 Gold Star family members that we hired and trained, and some of them appeared in front of the camera, and some of them worked behind.
So my question,
which was an incredible honor.
My question for you is not a human resource question. It's this: was this experience therapeutic for them?
Yes. Yeah, I asked one of the veterans that, like, you know, how was this experience for you? Command Sergeant Major, retired. And he was just talking about how, like, being on set and the camaraderie, movie making, the Hollywoodization of it and the glamour, that's the red carpet. That's so far down the road. But the actual making of a movie is a very blue-collar job.
Right.
You're working with your hands, you're lifting heavy equipment, you're moving cables, C-stands, sandbags, and it's very technical. And so, the camaraderie at lunch, or as they say, chow, or at night back at the hotel, or if they're staying in an Airbnb, and to sit around with a group of veterans and chew the fat, and just chat and have that camaraderie and that warmth and that brotherhood and sisterhood that they've been longing for is pretty incredible. And then with the Gold Star families, I got to be honest, I was nervous because this, you've seen the film and you know that we do go to some of the dark and quiet places of trauma.
Sure.
And I was worried because I didn't want to trigger them. I didn't want them to have to relive loss. And it was very cathartic to see the light return in a Gold Star mother's eyes on set, because she's there on set wearing her son, who was killed in action, wearing a button on her shirt and having a bag over her shoulder that was made out of his military uniform. And feel seen and heard and cared for, and then be able to, same thing at night, you wrap if it's a day shoot and go to dinner and have that community. And that's what this is really about. Like, I want folks to know that, especially for veterans that see this, that whatever you're going through, and not everybody has trauma, not everybody has been deployed or has been in conflict, but it's that sense of community, that longing. And I want them, and I hope this can bring folks together. This is just seeing the reactions, at full houses and audiences and theaters. Just seeing that communal experience has been so overwhelming and so gratifying. So, if you're a family member, especially for a civilian, this is it. There's a lot of humor in the film. It's an emotional journey for sure. It's entertaining, but I also feel like, and I hope it is, enlightening, and I hope it inspires folks that see it to get involved in their communities and to be and have a level of awareness of what our veterans and their families endure for service and sacrifice.
Well, Stephen, as people would say, you're doing the Lord's work with this.
Absolutely.
This is a fantastic film, folks. This is the best film out in 2026. Highly recommend you see it. You can buy tickets at themoviescreener.com/sheepdog. You can learn more and watch the trailer of the movie on sheepdogthemovie.com. And Stephen, how do people follow you and your work?
Sure. So on Instagram or anywhere, I'm at sgraham, GRAYHM. More importantly, you can find us on any of the social media platforms at Sheepdog the Movie. As you've said, sheepdogthemovie.com has all of our social media platforms on there, the trailer, a link to buy tickets across the country. Also, it's worth sharing that we have partnered with VetTix. VetTix is a 501c3 that provides free tickets to veterans across the country, great, for sporting events, for concerts. Sheepdog is the first movie they've ever partnered with. So if you sign up there, you can be eligible to get tickets to see Sheepdog in theaters. Otherwise, if you visit us at sheepdogthemovie.com, and you can get your tickets for this weekend. It's also worth sharing to our listeners, Sheepdog is a unicorn. We defied all the odds to get here.
Yes, you did.
There is no movie at our level outside the Hollywood system that is being released nationally. And it's important that if we're able to support these stories, to get them out there and to show the Hollywood machine that people do care about these stories and do care about the people that we depict on screen.
Well, as some would say, the Lord works in a mysterious way, or if you're not into that, the universe works in a mysterious way, and all because you broke down in 2011. So, Stephen, thank you so much for bringing this film to the public. Thank you for being dedicated and pushing it out, and we will push it on our end, and we hope you'll join us real soon.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you having me on. God bless you all.
God bless you.
You too.
This
Thank
is
you.
Breaking Battlegrounds, breakingbattlegrounds.vote. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. This is our final segment today with, of course, our financial guru, Gary Gigi, president and CEO of Gigi Capital. You can find Gary on X at Gary Gigi, G-Y-G-I, or at Gigi Capital, G-Y-G-I, Capital with an A, not an O, for those of you in New Mexico. And Gary, great to have you back on the show.
Good to be here. Thanks.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me, guys.
Look, we have an economy growing that does not bring a bunch of new jobs. What does this mean?
Yeah, I think this is a really really interesting topic because we are calling it like a low fire, meaning that employers are not firing their employees very much,
right?
Because it takes a lot to train them, and so they don't want to let somebody go just to have to retrain someone 6 months from now. So they're not letting people go, but they're also not hiring a lot. And so I think this is probably because the most common thing that's brought up is we don't know how tariffs are going to affect our business. Therefore, we're just going to go slow. And I think that's where we are, is that a lot of people are working, a couple of part-time jobs in order to make ends meet. And so it is an economy that's great for those that have. It is not an economy that's great for those that don't have right now.
It's interesting. We're doing a project in my political consulting firm in Georgia and recruiting grassroots. And the callers in a meeting this morning, getting an update on it, they said they were surprised how many people said they're working 60, 70-hour weeks.
Yes.
They were just really stunned by it, actually. Which tells me I need to work them harder. But they were.
Well, and
I am hearing the same thing. It's just anecdotal information from my side, but I'm hearing people that are saying.
Is it side hustles, or they're just working longer at their job? What is it? What are you hearing?
I'm hearing it's that they have no choice but to work the long hours in order to make ends meet, and they want to get back to a point where they have one job that pays them enough to provide for their family. And right now, they're not seeing that.
Which, by the way, Sean, you and I discussed this years ago, and we haven't recently. The most conservative principle you can have is to have an economy that if the couple or partners or whatever you want to call them make the decision where one person's income can take care of the household. There is not a more conservative principle than that principle. Right. All right, Gary, let's talk about the U.S. trade deficit fell to its lowest levels. Is this just because of tariffs? Is it smoke and mirrors? What is it?
Well, it's 1 month, and so this was for October because of the government shutdown. So let's not extrapolate 1 month into a trend, because we don't know, but certainly a massive drop in the trade imbalance. And so I think President Trump probably wants something like this because we're exporting more, importing less, so it fits into his narrative of what he wants to see. I want a robust economy where we're doing business with a lot of partners. So I would like a big trade, not imbalance, but a big trade opportunity for the U.S. And I think that's good for everyone. But if this continues in terms of a lower trade deficit, this is exactly what President Trump has been talking about, which is that reindustrializing our country, manufacturing more, and when we do that and we export more, then that's definitely good for national security and those that are looking for jobs.
So, so as we wrap up here, and I know you don't give specific stock tips, but I think something that's interesting is that Taiwan yesterday has committed to a $500 billion investment in U.S. semiconductor manufacturing, most of it in Arizona. If you're an investor and you're listening to the show, what outside of the semiconductor plants, what are industries that feed those that may have real growth opportunities? What are those industries?
Okay, so everyone talks about AI and what supports that, and definitely chips fall into that.
Right.
Because NVIDIA makes chips, and they're the chips everybody wants in order to make things run. However, the thing that you need to have power centers to run these massive data centers. And so you need utilities to locate close to the data centers. And I've seen some of that where they're re-energizing old nuclear plants that were shut down. They're bringing them back online in order to provide the electricity in order to make the data centers run.
Right.
That's the big deal, I think, which is that focus on the data centers and the utilities that make them run. And I think that's a good place to be looking.
Well, Gary, thanks so very much. How do folks reach you?
Yeah, a couple of ways. One of them is the phone, and that's 801-787-0342. But they can also reach me at our email, which is gary@gygicapital.com. So GARY@GYGICAPITAL.com.
Thank you, Gary. Hope you have a great weekend, buddy.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, folks, this is Breaking Battlegrounds. You can always follow us at breakingbattlegrounds.vote. You can follow us on Substack. We have lots of articles come out, or wherever you get your podcast. We're going to close today with the trailer for Sheepdog the movie. Please take a look at it. Consider going. It'd be fantastic. We want to thank all our guests on behalf of myself, Sean, and Sam Stone, and Budgetary Hell. Have a great weekend.
Am I under arrest?
You've assaulted an innocent man in front of his wife and baby girl. Do you remember any of that?
Does the defendant have any priors?
Resisting arrest, DUI, assault.
My client has been awarded a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star Medal for his combat service.
I'm ordering you to undergo a 60-day outpatient rehabilitation program. Good luck.
Nah, I'm not doing that. Do you know what the VA's put me through?
If you have a brain in your head, you're going to listen to me right now. Because the next time you try to provoke a lethal response from law enforcement, you might not have an angel sitting on your shoulder.
The courts think that you're going to fix me.
I hate to disappoint you, but I can't fix you. That's your job, not mine.
Did you know that your father got out?
He's a dangerous man, Calvin. Be careful.
We came back, and they spat on us at the airport. No homecoming parade, no celebrations.
You can't pretend like you have any idea what it's like to be in combat.
No, but what I do know is this field of work that I've dedicated my life to has helped a lot of people.
When you got back, something was different. It wasn't that you'd changed. You'd been replaced.
You lose your morality when you go to war. And the hard part is coming back to a civilian society that doesn't have any idea what's going on in your head.
It's hard to believe my enemy is the man I used to be.
I bet you wonder, where's my tribe? And I ain't talking about no friendship neither. I'm talking about brotherhood.
What is it that you truly want, Calvin?
I just want to wake up in the morning and feel something.
Our pain is relative, son. Sometimes we gotta fall apart to find ourselves all over again.
You were willing to give your life for your country. Now maybe you can try living for it.
What are you feeding this guy? Look at this.
What do you want? I did 4 tours.
Of the Cheesecake Factory.
Oh! Okay. Little spicy, little spicy.